when you talk about Texas Midwest, like it drives me nuts because Texas is not the Midwest.
No, the Texas is the Confederacy.
You just have that queued up.
We have that queued up on for White Guy Wednesdays. This is when Vaughn and I, me and Kuba came up with the idea that we should try and bring back a kind of left-wing neo-confederalism, which says, although the Confederates had problems, at least they fought the capitalist imperialist Americans.
Jesus.
Wow. That's
Yeah, well, I'm staying out of that.
Maoism, Maoism, Calhounism, the People's War.
Jesus Christ, Mouse Calhounism.
Mao's Calhounism.
That is a dark turn in ideology.
And I'm sure it does exist in some corner of the internet too.
There is a pretty good Twitter account called, I think it's called Tennessee Pol Pot, which does that whole thing. So, Marxist-Leninist Calhounism. That's what we're all about here on White Guy Wednesdays. Bringing back the revolutionary spirit of the Confederate States of America. But
no.
I think just to circle back, I think it's okay to call Texas the Midwest just because they need a little bit of humbling.
We can get into that. We can get into that as we go.
Okay, well, we got a super chat here. What's this from Strom account? Actually, anti-neo-confederalism, anti-chauvinist, southern nationalist is here. There we go. So we do have anti-confederate.
Got a member of the fucking youth patriot org over here. It's fucking
going
You
down.
guys are familiar with the YPO? The YPO out of Chicago in the 60s, member of the Rainbow Coalition.
The Young Patriots,
Young Pates. Yeah.
When I was a kid, all I thought was like the Confederate battle flag was the cool flag on the Dukes of Hazzard's car. I had like a Dukes of Hazzard's car set with Boss Hogg, with what was the car had a name, but they never went through the doors.
The General Lee.
The General Lee. Jesus Christ, man! Like how?
No, but I mean, like, look at that. I mean, like, sorry, Gene. I'm so bad at being interviewed.
Go for it.
I go to host mode immediately.
Go for it.
No, but I mean, like, I think there's something to be said about, the Dukes of Hazzard. Even I know this is the later conversation we're gonna get into, but like, like anti-cop show about the South, right? Mm-hmm. And that memory's almost completely forgotten, right? Like this was one of the most popular sort of tellings of like, Southern, we call it sitcom, whatever. But the whole point was like, they're just like outlaws. They hate the fucking cops and they're running and, causing trouble and mischief. And now we have these bizarre things where you see on people's pickup trucks, like I love outlaw country music, and there's a blue line flag right next to it.
Brother, there used to be a radio station in this town that was called The Outlaw, and towards its end of its run, they were running. It was like 2017 or so, running The Outlaw Backs the Blue ads.
Outlaw as a lifestyle brand. That's what it is. It's outlaw. It means you don't brush your teeth when mommy tells you.
Yeah, basically. But you respect the cops. That's what's important.
That's right.
I mean, I couldn't see the boys driving the General Lee respecting Boss Hogg, but it is what it is. But yeah, what I wanted to talk to you guys about was, a little bit of this debate that's going on. Refracted through the left about like what is Trump country, and yet David, you may wrangle under my definition of Texas as the Midwest, but Texas really is a little bit like Missouri, a kind of gateway state, right? It's a little bit of everything. Missouri's got a little bit of Yankee in it. I mean, I go to St. Louis and I'm like, this is like a European city, looks like a European city. It's got its
maybe after the war.
I mean, it's got. I remember driving around
St. Louis. I'm sorry, I love St. Louis. It's a beautiful city.
Well, I remember driving around there and thinking, like, this looks like Leeds. It's got that red brick. It's got that 19th century industrial look. You go to KC, it's kind of like it's Art Deco. It's very Midwest as cities go. You come down here to the Ozarks. It's very Southern. Yet, of course, historically, as many people may or may not know, this was actually the heart of Union country during the Civil War, and it was the middle of the state where you had these big plantations, and I think also in the Boot Heel where you had where you had
Yeah,
this.
they called the Missouri River Valley Little Dixie. So
Mm.
actually, the northern half of the state was much more slave supporting than the southern half.
And Texas, I mean, it was in the Confederacy, but it isn't really 100% part of that, Southern menu.
I think that's fair.
It's got a dash of the Midwest in it. It's got a dash of the South in it, and it's got a dash of the Southwest in it, right?
Mhm.
It's got so these are like both gateway gateway states to larger cultural zones. But overall, in the story of America, especially in our era, we have this coastal population, and then we have this flyover country that is almost like a mythical land to a lot of people. I feel like a lot of Yankees coming here. It's like Lawrence of Arabia. They're coming, they're meeting these savages, and you have these two tendencies. One, obviously, which we can talk about perhaps first, is this kind of liberal perception that the Midwest, the South, the flyover country, it's the white working class. It's all white people. They're all Republicans. They're all racist. But I think the reality is a little bit more complicated than that. So, David, perhaps you want to give us up, like, how do you view, especially, we know about, there is a radical tradition, but even today, the Republican control is not as hegemonic as you might think.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. And with Texas, I think it's difficult to talk about the state, so maybe we can sort of compartmentalize things, right? Because like there's a rural parts of Texas, but a lot of people miss it. Like, Texas is like one of the more urban states in the United States, in the country. I'm from Austin, and I live in what's called the Texas Triangle, which is Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston, where the vast majority of the state lives, and they live in these kind of semi-urban, like urban or like suburban areas. And then you have a lot of the rest of the state that is more rural and also like sparsely populated. So that's one thing. But yeah, I mean, I generally, like when I talk about Texas to folks, and we do this a lot on Left Reckoning, obviously, I remind people of a couple different things. One, like that radical tradition, which you just sort of mentioned, and we could get into that if we want to, but we don't need to right now. And two, that like yes, the Republicans run this state, and like they're going to kick the Beto's ass, and they're going to kick for the most part like anyone that the Texas State Democratic Party puts up on a statewide election. But remember a couple things. Like one, the vast majority of the state doesn't vote. And even if you look at, for example, like public opinion polls, the way that the Republican Party governs the state of Texas is out of line even with their base. Like full-on abortion bans like what we have here in Texas are wildly unpopular if you actually look at like who thinks that like there should be no exceptions for abortion or anything like that. That's not a like majoritarian position. But what you have here is a political coalition, being the Republican Party right now, that like is only interested and only worried about challenges from the far right. And that governs their political process, like what the things that they put forward, the things that they enact. So like we really, like I oftentimes say, it's like we do have a kind of occupied government kind of thing going on in Texas right now. I think a lot of other states too, where like when you have one party rule for so long, there's not a lot of space for deviation. Because if you're a Republican who might be more of a moderate, for example, you're just going to get your ass kicked the next time you go to run for office. So like I think that I know we're going to talk more deeply about these things. So maybe as my opening statement, I would say, like, I think sometimes it's really important to disentangle the state government from the people.
What are your thoughts on it, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, to kind
of Pat,
to echo what David was saying about occupied. An occupied government. It doesn't even take that long. Like Texas has been going a lot longer. Missouri used to be very purple. It used to be the purple state. It was the bellwether state in every presidential election since like Truman until Bush, I think. You know, like, and we had a Democratic governor as recently as
Jay Nixon.
during the Obama administration. So it's not you know, moving insanely to the right every day in the legislature and, you know, the laws that we're passing in this state. So yeah, I think that really drive home that it's not the people here. Again, the vast majority of these people don't vote. And they're not as, you know, we're here as white guy representatives of the flyover country, but like, you got to remember that places like St. Louis and Kansas City and Chicago and Dallas and San Antonio, these places exist and they are not that white. You know?
Or even just like on that, like just reminding folks, like Texas is a majority minority state too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's I think unique to Texas versus Missouri. But like, you know, I think a lot of times too, when people think of Texas, it's something very different from like what Texas is on the ground for people.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a kind of cartoonish image of these places and a kind of misunderstanding of how politics takes place in these places. I mean, I'm talking from, and Pat knows more about this than I do, but, you know, for example, if you look at the local government in Springfield, like Democrats might as well not run, right? You know, it's, you know, they're not going to win.
Well, I would say local, like as the city council, I would say there's no distinguishing in this city between like a moderate Republican and a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
The Democratic Party in this city, like in this county, especially this county Democratic committee, is fairly conservative, and there's no room between the two. So there is basically this like moderate you run as a moderate Republican or you run as a far right crank,
which I think has an interesting impact on the politics in this place, because you end up with, weirdly enough, in the local government, more moderate Republicans, because you have the Chamber of Commerce Republicans who have a chunk of the Republican vote, and then all the Democrats just vote for him because they don't want to let the crazy in. So there is a weird.
Y'all got Claire McCaskill there.
We had Claire McCaskill, lovely.
Well, she's still around, saying
she's still around. I mean, they ran.
You don't live here, not down here.
Not down here. She did have an office down here, but they, you know, after she was booted, the person they ran next was the Anheuser-Busch heiress. That was
nice.
She didn't do very well.
No, she flopped pretty hard.
Flopped pretty hard, but you know, like the Democratic Party doesn't really make that much of an effort in Missouri, and you know, Democrats.
Nor do they do here.
And just,
I mean, it's a nightmare. I mean, like, sorry, not to cut you off, Gene, but like, you know, one of the things that has been really telling and frightening as somebody, you know, who lives here has been the kind of retreat of the Democratic Party, both on the congressional and the state level, from a lot of these parts of Texas, particularly South Texas, right? South Texas is predominantly like Hispanic, right? And it's one of those things, classic Democrat fantasy, which like demographics are destiny, right? That like, oh, you know, the population of Texas is changing in one way or the other. We're just going to be able to win. Well, one, that didn't turn out to be true. And also turns out to be true that Republicans can win over those voters. And maybe I think the three of us are like anti-essentialists. You know, so like this isn't very surprising to us, but like to them, it's like this idea that the kind of right-wing propaganda or whatever, the political arguments that they make might also work on Hispanic Texan was like an impossibility for a lot of Democratic strategists.
well, I mean, the Democrats, the whole demographics is destiny is just an inversion of white replacement theory, right? It's white replacement theory, but good. It's like, but it'd be a good thing if because white people are essentially bad.
But it's fundamentally passive as opposed to they don't even have a plan behind their white it's not this nefarious cabal causing this, you know, to happen or whatever. It's Dems sitting back and saying we ain't gonna do shit because this is self-evident.
And we own those votes forever, basically, you know. And you know, it's disastrous for them. You know, the Republicans have had tremendous success, and like, you know, let's like be clear about it. It's like, you know, the Democrats are still very strong in that part of the state, but with how much of that sort of traditionally being like a blue wall, if you want to call it that, that's waning. Which means both for presidential and I think most consequentially like state level elections. I mean, it's really devastating for the Democratic Party here. And it's just like it's a lack of willingness to sort of look at the appeal of the Republican Party in this state. It's a lack of understanding of how people live here. Because like, Texas has its problems. I'm not going to come up out here and say that like, some kind of like post-racial utopia. Far from it. But the fact is that particularly in like those regions of the state, like people live together. Do you know what I mean? Like they do the same things, they go to the same places, they eat the same food, they hang out. And the Republican Party being able to appeal to maybe like a white working class voter, why do you think that that's not ever going to appeal to somebody else in that same community? And it's just like this overemphasis on race as sort of destiny or determining like what people think or how they're going to vote or participate in politics that is really damaging to the Democratic Party here.
Well,